Hello! So this video is a little different than what we've been doing lately, and this was actually recommended to me by some of my Patreon members as a suggestion for content for 2026. So today we are going to go over how I prep for sessions. That's why we're at a weird angle, because I'm going to show you everything on screen. So these sessions are for my West Marches campaign, which can be sometimes a lot of prep, sometimes it's no prep. It kind of just like depends on what quests there are. I will just add a little preface here. Technically, my Foundry is set up for tonight's game, which is a different session. And so I won't be going into that in this video per se, but I will be going over it in future videos if that's something you guys want. But without further ado, let's dive in. So for this particular quest, this was actually something that a player suggested to go after, essentially a group of goblins that have been already harassing the civilians of our main civilization or our main town, Honor's Reach. There was a previous episode. You can actually watch these on my Patreon right now. You can watch the actual plays and see. I'll link the two that are related to this quest. But this is a follow-up after the original group followed the goblins to what looked to be an amusement park of sorts, and old decrepit one. And so they unfortunately were not able to capture or defeat the goblins that were there, and the goblins did retreat. And so this is a follow-up mission to that. I'm going to show you kind of my process for setting up and prepping for this kind of session. So I have recently started using Obsidian. I honestly don't know if I like it because I am such a handwritten note taker kind of girl. But every time I ever mention Notion, everyone's like, you should try Obsidian. It's so much better than that. And so I have been trying it. I don't necessarily think it's better. I think the whole system is less user-friendly than Notion, but there are aspects of it that I like. I will be using Obsidian, and you'll be able to see a little bit of my setup. If you guys want a full tour of my setup, we can talk about it. Honestly, give me a few more months though, because it still needs a lot of tweaking to make it actually work for me in the way I do session prep and stuff. I also just want to add that this session has already happened, so you'll also get to see a little bit about what I do after, or how I feel about it after, and usually what I do for that. Let's just look at my Obsidian page for it. So before I do literally anything else, I just try to get my ideas out on paper and flesh them out better. I can't show you everything because this is going to be a multi-parter. It'll probably be like a whole mini arc. I do have great ideas for this particular quest, so that makes it a lot of fun. But my typical setup on Obsidian has up here at the top, it has the date, the tier level. So in our West Marches, we divide everybody in groups based on their level, following kind of the Adventure League tier system. And that helps us prep adventures for those characters. Actually, the status for this one should be completed now. And then I also put the session date. The date and time here, I think, is the last time I edited it or opened it. Like I said, I have a template. So the template always gives me these two boxes. On the one side, I put the players because, again, my players change. This is the West Marches, so every session could be 5 completely different characters. And for me, I like to know who's going to be there, because I have learned, especially with tier 2 adventurers, how they, or what they like out of a D&D session, how much they roleplay, how much they focus on the tactical stuff. And so having an idea of who's here, as well as the party composition, is super good for me, especially if I know some of these people aren't very big on healing. So maybe I'll If there's a lot of battle in this, I'll throw in a couple healing potions as loot, that kind of thing. Not always, because they have other ways of gathering healing potions and things, and they should be prepping as well because they also know that the teams might not always have a healer, that kind of thing. So I don't always do all of that, especially for this one. Like, this is the person who requested this. I always have this to-do list thing on the side. It's probably kind of hard to read at the moment since everything's checked off. But let me just like uncheck it so you guys can read it. But this is all the to-dos I usually have to do to prep things. So everything from just a basic description, figuring out my monsters and my skill challenges, my social encounters if applicable, and of course doing maps. That's kind of just basic session prep for me. From there, music I always put as an additional thing. Like if I have time to focus on music, I do like to add, specific music for specific enemies or things like that, or special moments. Sometimes I prep these ahead of time and post quests on my own on the quest board, or I, post to encourage people to join these things, especially for tier 1 adventures. So I have that on here as a to-do so that I know if I've actually posted this one or not. But again, this one was a request from a player, so I didn't really have to do that. This is something run on Discord. I create a little Discord event on my server. Finally, of course, is importing the player tokens. You wouldn't have to do this, but again, so many players. So we have one Foundry database where we have all the I think it's like 80 or 90 characters on there. That's where they kind of live. And then we export them from that database into our personal, I also have one that I give out to GMs to use as well. Foundry, they then run the whole session, and then after the session, we export them from my personal one and put them back on that main server, and then delete everything off of our personal servers. This kind of helps keep our personal servers running well, because it's hard to run if there's a whole bunch of people in there, as well as you don't want interference from other players, things like that. So it's just easier. You wouldn't necessarily have to do that, and I won't explain this every time I do a little West Marches thing, because this checklist will never change. This like front part will pretty much never change. In my session prep, I always include the description. So this is the thing that I post on the quest board, or whatever the players have requested, because sometimes they request things and they can hint at things that they are looking for or looking to do. So this one was about, finding the home base of the goblins. You can see he like posted this whole thing and kind of stressing the importance going in, being stealthy and bringing back information is like highest priority. Sabotage if we can, but mostly get back alive with as much information as we can. And so I think this already helped me set up the general idea. The next section I always have is this at a glance section. And so I don't need this in particular right now, but I typically use this if I don't plan on running the session right away, or if I need to have resources or something at a glance. Like you can see this quick reference section. I have a how to hold your breath little quick tip, because I always forget how that happens. I sometimes put fall damage in here, things like that. So, but you can always like hide these if you don't need it. So, which is cool about Obsidian. That's kind of what I use this at a glance section for. I also include secrets and clues up here if I want to ensure I drop something about the main plot line. There is, even though it's a West Marches, we do have some major baddie players out there moving around and doing things and working in the shadows, and I like to drop hints about these certain things. I didn't use it in this particular instance. The plan for right now is to come back and add that in afterwards. And then I also include important NPCs and people here. So I haven't been as good at doing that in this one. When I was on my Notion server, I used to do that so that I could click essentially one page and see all the quests that a particular NPC handed out, or all the information that players have gathered over time, or how this character or NPC has changed over time. I know it's pretty easy to tag things on Obsidian as well, but I don't actually have all my NPCs information in here yet, and so unfortunately I'm gonna have to go back and like fill all this in. It shouldn't be too hard, but again, this is like because I'm still kind of working with Obsidian. I also, if I like, I'm sure I want specific encounters in this, I will put that under quick at a glance too. Sometimes I don't put it here, and sometimes I just put it in the whole session prep. This section is more like, I have ideas, I need to get it down, put it here, and then come back and flesh it out later. But because for this one, I kind of fleshed it all out in one go instead of like nitpicking and holding on to these thoughts, I think of a lot of cool D&D things in the shower, so I end up having to like open it up on my phone and like put notes in here. That's normally what this section is for. This encounter balancing thing is actually a form. It always does this. It's not perfect, but it's actually a copy of an Excel sheet that I use to balance my encounters, made by one of my mods, Arrowed, on the Discord server, and I've been using it a lot. It's, you know, it's not a perfect system, but it's better than other things that I've had out there, especially since we're using 2024 rules. And I don't know if some of those, like Kobold Fight Club, I don't know if that's actually updated for 2024 rules or not. And so I've been using this and it's been super helpful. If you scroll, I need to make it bigger. That is also because I was on my tablet and my tablet screen is much smaller, so I made it much smaller. But you can see like at a glance, like down here, I have the monster count and then the CR level of the monsters. You put their number of PCs at the top and their average level. And then on this side, you can pretty much, it'll tell you if it's likely or unlikely to challenge the players, how deadly it is, what this encounter is, what the threshold for deadly is, etc. So yeah, so that's that, but I always have to hide it when I'm not using it because it makes Obsidian freak out a little bit. And then we get into, I call this session notes. This is kind of more session prep, and I typically go back in and write a summary. I will have to like hide some of this probably, but for this particular one, we are traveling, again, it's a Westmarcher, so there's a lot of hex crawling in this, but because of the nature of this quest, since they're following a specific trail, they're not just like exploring the world. I had specific landmarks and things that I wanted them to encounter along the way. So they started back at the amusement park, leaving from the trail they found. There, I have, in general, I always put anything I want to read aloud in a quote box like this. So I don't always read it word for word, but it helps me to think out that sort of stuff before I get to the session, because one, I'm an anxious DM, so if I don't feel prepared, it makes it harder for me to come up with these words on the spot anyway. And so having this on here helps. A lot of times I start reading it and then I just ad-lib the rest, which is kind of how I do script writing for YouTube. I always have like an intro, and I try to make an outro as well, because I realize by the end of the session, I can't think very clearly to close out the session well. So I try to prepare a couple ways that the session could end or pause or whatever, so that I can be prepared in those moments as well. I'm not the best at improvisation. I'm not horrible, but I feel better when I feel prepared, and it makes it easier for me run the session. For this particular one, I actually broke it down into specific days because they can travel about 4 hexes in a day. They're following a trail, and the trail is pretty obvious because it is a horde of goblins leaving what was a kind of like a forwarding outpost and heading back to their main camp. I separated this into their days of travel. Usually when I do this, I include like a table, like a roll table of random events. And depending on what color the hex is, so we have blue is like a safe hex. We have like an orangey yellow color, which is hexes that players have passed through, but not necessarily cleared of monsters. And then we have red hexes. So depending on that determines what dice I have the players roll, and on a 1, something bad happens. On a 20, something good or semi-good happens if they're in a monster-infested area. But I still kind of plan them out, and that is so that I have everything prepared in Foundry, and we can talk about that in other, I'm sure there'll be more hex crawling related West Marches sessions we can talk about. But for this one, again, I separated it by day. So they started back at the amusement park. You'll notice this is kind of like just a brain dump of like everything I want to kind of go over on each day. There's some example ideas for checks. I don't always follow these exactly. I do have, this should have been in a quote box, but that's okay. I already knew that I had to read this, and then, you know, questions about how fast they're moving, describing that the park looks exactly the way they left it, and how long it's been since the last time they were here. A survival check, it was kind of to find the trail, but then again, like I said, it was more to determine how long it took to find the trail, because again, the whole mission is following this trail. And so it's a kind of assumed that they would follow it. You don't have to play it that way, I guess, but that's the way I was going. And if they rolled higher than, I said like a 15, based on they're all level 7, average is level 7. If they got higher than a 15, they also noticed that they're dragging stuff with them, which I can't explain what that is right now, since again, we haven't, this is gonna be a second session. Figured the first day would be pretty quick. The next day was the broken bridge. So again, a survival check, but this time, if it was a plus 15, like over 15, it would determine what time they arrived. They ended up rolling really well, so they ended up arriving kind of in early afternoon, late morning. Then I have a little thing here that Shet says at the entrance there's a no tall folks allowed kind of idea. Before I got to any of these like goblin traps or anything like that, I just had this information here. I also knew that I wanted to do another stopping point along the way about an empty graveyard, hinting at kind of another whole story arc maybe that could come up in the West Marches. So I knew I wanted that to be day 3. And then for day 4, I wanted there to be a hill outpost that hints at other things that might be waiting near the goblin camp, and also have like an actual battle there with kind of more heavily armed goblins and that kind of thing. I already had those things figured out. And then I also had the actual war camp, which I can't go over in this video, but I knew that that would be the final point. And then that bloomed into a whole nother idea that has a couple more locations as well, but I didn't expect to get to that in this one session. I expected them to maybe possibly make it to the war camp, but because I had the war camp positioned so far away, and I will kind of show that, I knew I wanted to put some points of interest along that trail. That would be places that other people could follow up on later if they wanted. Or when I first started this, it was day 1. I broke up the adventure based on the amount of hexes they could travel to and where the amusement park was and where the war camp was. Divided that by days of travel and essentially put points of interest along that path. I did kind of push through things like watches and things like that just because I knew this would be kind of a really heavy like information intel gathering type of thing. So I kind of let the nights be easier than they probably would be usually. But I also was trying to shove as much information as possible into one session so that we only have like 2 sessions for this particular one. Most West Marches, they try to keep everything wrapped up in one session. And I can do that most of the time, but I find some of these things are important, and so they need a little bit more time to expand them. Let's just look at that map real fast so you guys can see. So this is the player view of our West Marches Hexcrawl map. So Honor's Reach is way down here. You can see with my big foam finger. So that's our base of operations, essentially. The amusement park was here. It was called Four Banners. I figured in a day, since most of these hexes are blue, they could make it here and be able to kind of start the adventure from here. I did allow them to roleplay and kind of describe their characters and all of that in the beginning, because again, remember, like, you wouldn't necessarily have to have your players explain all of their characters and how they look and etc. in a normal campaign, but this is a West Marches and not everybody plays with everybody else. They make new characters, things like that. So we kind of have to do a little bit of that every session, but most people kind of keep it pretty short and it's great. Then I knew that well, this is the Watchful Hill. I can't point out where the warband camp is, but let's just say it's a little bit further, and I kind of made the trail of the goblins follow this particular path for a reason. So you see I added some things here. So right here is the broken bridge, and right here is the empty graveyard, and not on the map, but underneath the party's token flag here is where I have the little forwarding, like, scouting camp outpost on a hill. That's as far as they made it. I kind of planned it out based on, okay, in one day they can travel about 4 hexes if they're going at a normal speed. If they're trying to follow quickly, then of course they can move like 6. If they're going slow, it's like 2. But I was like, average is 4, so I kind of tried to put, you know, in one day, something interesting, in another day, something interesting, and the third day, something interesting. This is, I'm technically not in the GM screen right now, so I don't know that I can move it, but this is technically a party token, and so you can move it around. And this module is actually Hexplorer. I believe it's a Ripper 93 module or for Foundry, and you can like color things. You usually get 1 hex beyond that, just so you can get the lay of the land, that kind of thing. These are like points of interest that the players have found and put on the map. I believe Hexplorer is a paid, be like a Patreon member for that particular module, but I highly recommend it for hex crawlers. So once I kind of have the general idea, actually we're gonna kind of go back and forth here. Once I have the general idea of what I want the session to consist of, then I consider what kind of encounters I want. I figured the first one, that broken bridge, would be something, goblins like a lot of traps, so I figured they would have set something up knowing that they're being followed to kind of hinder the players. Again, I had the empty graveyard idea as a way to pull in other quest lines. And then I had the Hill of Watchful Stones. I was gonna try to make a map for this, but then I realized I really have to make a map for something else. And I found all of these maps. So that was the next part for me, was to go through some of my resources and find maps before I start figuring out how many encounters, what kind of traps, that kind of thing I wanted on each map. Most of these are actually birdie maps because I like to have the same consistent style of maps in all of my adventures, and so I like the basic dungeon draft map assets. And so I actually got most of these from Birdie. The empty graveyard is actually a map from Matthew W., who's also another creator that I know, who also uses the same style of assets as Dungeon Draft, which I enjoy, but he also collaborated with another Patreon member who made artwork for this particular map, and I actually used that on my Foundry as well. And I'll kind of show how I do that. It's kind of overkill. You don't really have to do that, but my Foundry, so this is my Foundry, and you'll have to just excuse, again, this is prepped for a different campaign or a different session happening later tonight. But usually I have this dashboard. This particular picture was not a lighthouse at the time. I had it as a green field. And then when I ended up going to the graveyard, I actually made a tile. And I just placed it on here. I think I had to crop it. I tried to keep the name, But yeah, so this was some of the artwork again from a different Patreon collab that they did. And I usually just put this right behind here. And then when I hide it, and then when I'm ready to show it, I'll reveal it. I'll drop it back behind here and give them kind of the ambiance of that area. So for this one, I used several maps from Birdies. Not this one, actually. I ended up using this particular bridge. You can see their tokens are still on here even. And I knew I wanted to have a sign in the front, so I just put some tiles on here. I also have tiles on here for traps. So they don't do anything. It's literally just for me to know where the traps are going to be triggered and that kind of thing. And again, that was just making traps with icons. These arrows actually, let's see if I can move a character here, actually move players up and down on the map. So I did set that up. I think I have to go to that to see it, but you can see now he's up here. I also added some loot on here. They never inspected this barrel, but that was there. They had, I just put in some magic items here because I was like, I mean, this was probably a tower where they took tolls, but also confiscated certain items that they didn't want to allow across the river. And that was what was in that chest. So I did all that pretty quickly, double checked the lighting and all of that too, which I always mess up. So that was the first map I found. And then I decided to figure out the traps. So the traps on here, I had some clay pot landmines, a bag of rocks above a door, a safe path, where they painted a little red thing that said, "This is the safe path," but then wrote in Goblin for the tall ones only. So it's not really a safe path. Part of this, I actually used I used two resources to come up with these. I used in the DMG itself, there's actually a section on traps and how to build them and how to set the DC, set the amount of damage, etc. I used that to figure out all the DCs for this, all of the damage, that kind of thing. And then I actually used AI to just give me 10 different ideas. And most of them were poop or very standard. I then kind of took those ideas and made them better. So there was one that was like a tripwire outside the door, but it didn't really work for my map. So I was like, well, what would they put? They would expect everybody to come through the door this way. So maybe they'd hang something above the door. And so I was like, okay, a bag of rocks, why not? There was like a clay pot landmine idea, but it really just did like an itchy powder. I added some metallic bits so that they also take a little bit of damage. The safe path one was the opposite. So it was it actually marked the safe path, but I was like, I want my goblins to be tricky and try to pull one over on them. So I kind of changed that one as well. So like I said, I used a little bit of AI in that regard, and I do use AI on and off. I don't really use it to like completely write the adventure for me because it just doesn't do it. But for things like, I need trap ideas, I literally will go and be like, can you give me 10 trap ideas that goblins would have? And it'll just give you like the bare bones ideas. And then I use that resource in the DMG to like actually add the stats and things like that. And of course, obviously I tweak things. For the empty graveyard scene, I just knew that I wanted all the graves to be completely empty. So this is not really an encounter, but I wanted them to know that a bunch of undead were raised here and are traveling kind of northeast, the opposite direction that they are going. I have just a basic Arcana check. I don't think they did Arcana. I think they did something else. I can't remember. Oh no, they use a detect magic spell. I let that be kind of like my Arcana check. And this technically is also something I kind of read aloud, but I didn't put it in quotes. You can tell I was kind of trying to do this quickly. Then we have the Hill of Watchful Stones. So I ended up finding a map that was almost perfect for this from Birdie. I'll show that graveyard too, just because it's really pretty. Even though it's not like empty like I wanted. I did have their tokens here just in case. But this is a map that Matthew W made, and it's very pretty. So also you could subscribe to him. He's also on Patreon. But I ended up doing this watchful. I found this one is a Birdie map special here. You can see all my guys are dead. But it was almost perfect. It had these like 3 stones, and it did not have this statue in it. So what I ended up doing is going into Dungeon Draft, making the background transparent, and then making a little statue-esque sort of situation here, and then exporting that as a PNG and plopping it onto the map as a tile. This is also why I like having maps that are standard Dungeon Draft sets, because I like to add things and tailor it to my session. And so I mess up Birdie's maps all the times. Don't tell him, or do. But you can also see on here on the map, all these red squares are traps. So this one that's close to my foam finger here, this one was actually one they didn't actually see. That's why it looks a little pink instead of red. But they did find the noisemakers. They did see the nets playing into that hole. This is like a little base that they have, and they are prepared for intruders. For this as well, I also added, I wanted to have at least one combat encounter. I ended up downloading from Mystic Arts. I'm a patron of his as well. Downloaded some of his like crazy goblins. And so I ended up, the problem is, kind of a problem, I guess, is that these are actually, they are Obsidian files, which is great. So you can import them here. It's really hard to import these into Foundry without certain modules. So usually I find these and I will try to copy everything, and I'll just show real quick. So I'll copy this part here. But if you go into my Foundry, I have down here at the, well, my head is in the way. Hold on. Just move to the side a little bit here, but there's an import stat block down here. You click on that. Then you can put all that information in here. I always uncheck this auto parse thing. And then put that in here. And then I'll click this parse button and kind of just double check that everything was okay. Some of it didn't actually import okay, but it is what it is. And then I'll hit that import button, and then you can double check things. This one worked fine. And the other thing I do is, if I don't have art for it, which none of his stuff has art, this is one of those cases where I try to make AI artwork and it doesn't always work. It would be better if I could just hire an artist to draw what I'm envisioning, but I don't have the time or the money, unfortunately, to do that. And a lot of times they literally just kill my enemies anyway. But I use Bing AI image creator for these sorts of things. So if we look at my monsters, so if we look at the Goblin Tripper here, it's really not the best. It really isn't, and but it does the job. Sometimes I also just duplicate like this Goblin Warrior. This is the basic art from the monster manual. Sometimes I just duplicate or like find the artwork in there and just use that too, just because it's still a real person made it, and then honestly it's better. So then this is not, they're creepy and they weren't exactly the vibe I was going for, but I also kind of ran out of time, and I always do images like this kind of towards the end. I ended up taking all of their CRs, so I put how many of each down here on my session notes, But typically what I do is I use, again, this encounter balancing. I look at the CRs, I like play around with the numbers, and then I figure out, okay, I want 2 of these, 2 of these, 2 of these. When it comes to encounter balancing, it's really, really hard to kill characters in 2024. They're totally OP, and I think that is what D&D is going for, which makes it fun for players, so it's not like the end of the world for me, but I also want there to be stakes. And so if it's too easy for the players all the time, if they always come out on top, that to me takes the fun out of the game. So while I joke with all of my West Marches players that I want to kill their characters, and I still haven't in a year, but really my main goal is to knock 2 or more unconscious every game. And if I do that, I consider that a win. So for the GM, you know, depending on the number of encounters per day, I will tweak the CR levels and the monster count to make at least one of those battles deadly. Because otherwise you really don't get the opportunity to do that. So I did make this one deadly. I did realize I messed up some stuff and then had to roll with it anyway, which we can talk about at the end. If I have more than one encounter in a 1 day span, I will end up making one just like super hard, and then making the other ones like low, medium. Like not everything has to be a deadly challenge. And I do want them to feel powerful, but I want the opportunity to knock someone unconscious. And so I do usually try to have at least one battle that feels more intense, because this world is supposed to also be monster filled, and monsters are supposed to be super dangerous, even for adventurers. I want that feel in my camp, or in this West Marches scenario. That was that. I added some details about what I wanted the statue to reveal. Again, I added a statue in particular to hint at a kind of beast that lives in the lake. I wanted to hint that the goblins are afraid of some sort of creature in the lake. And I also wanted to note that they're trying to find something to appease the mistress who had originally tasked them with going and trying to infiltrate the Honor's Reach during our first epic. All of that was, I was trying to wrap all of that into this little area. I did that by adding some graffiti to the statues, and also just making a carving of a like beautiful, almost Leviathan sea serpent type creature guarding these like homes or families in this statue, and having the stones kind of depicting that tale. So yeah, that is in general my notes. I cannot show you anything else, unfortunately. But I also ended up prepping the base as well as a whole like side mission that'll probably turn into another request later on. I don't expect the players to interact with that in the next session either. If you like what you're watching, consider supporting me on Patreon, the best way to support creators on YouTube. You can get behind the scenes, plus you can get ad-free versions of my videos. Also, live streams, there's shop discounts, hopefully some paper products coming out, definitely a magazine in the works. There's lots of stuff there. Link in the description. Before I close this out, one of the things that some of my Patreon members mentioned was that they really like when I talk about things I could have done better. And so I wanted to save this end part for that. And moving forward, I think I will try to like record this in 2 sessions. One where you can kind of see me doing this almost live. Obviously I can't share it live, but sharing how I'm actually going through and prepping things. And then adding a section afterwards where I talk about what I think I could do better. For this particular one, what I think I could have done better is, one, some of those goblins, I realized they were pretty OP, but I only realized it as we were like fighting. And so on the fly added a constitution save to one of their abilities. Didn't have to do that because it would have been a lot of damage, but what ended up happening was the players themselves ended up hypnotizing pretty much everyone, so they had control of the turns and the action economy. And so it ended up being a mute point at that point. And I find I do this a lot because I am so afraid of a TPK. So for those who don't know, I'm so afraid of a total party kill. I don't really want to wipe everybody out. That is not my goal, because people don't have fun if it's like that, because it just feels unfair. It's one thing to kill one player or like, you know, half the party or something, but to kill the whole party, it seems like that's a thing that I messed up, not a thing that was intentional or, you know, meant to happen. Granted, sometimes it happens because the players just roll poorly, you know, the situation just ends up, you know, being rough because they didn't strategize, you know, things like that. On the fly, I changed it so that they had a constitution save, and they really didn't need to. And so that's really something I regret. And I need to I need to remember that the abilities are the way they are for that CR level for a reason. And I have to remember that I tried to make this encounter deadly. So yes, I'm supposed to knock people out pretty quickly because otherwise they kill me first. Like I said, I'm very bad in improvisation, but that was partially because I hadn't reviewed that stat block very well, and I needed to be more comfortable with that stat block. The anxiety of not wanting to kill my entire party took over in those moments. So that was definitely something I could have done a lot better. I do think, if you didn't know, I am pregnant. So I do think by the time we get to the end of a session, so this was about a 4 hours long session, 4.5 actually. By the time we get to that point, normally non-pregnant me would run out of words and be like struggling. But now I think, because I also have a little bit of that, like, we call it pregnancy brain, where I can't remember things, I can't remember words, I mix things up in my head. I do feel like that affects me more, and I need to give myself more grace, because I know by the end of it I was getting like, not disappointed, but like frustrated with myself on my ability to put words together and describe the situation in front of people. I do think, since I still have, like, you know, the whole trimester and a half left of pregnancy, I need to give myself a little bit more of a break in that regard. That's a very specific to me kind of feedback. Other thing I absolutely loved was that the players ended up, so the other thing, I don't think I can show it on here. Yeah, I can't show it on here because it's all, it has a lot to do with the next part of this mission as well. But I actually have a whole section of that I literally just title Possible Party Plans. And this is like ideas I can come up with on the fly about how they can approach a situation. If it's like something that requires stealth or requires infiltration, or, you know, a way they can gain information, or, oop, I just bumped the whole entire desk, or things like that. So I have this section, and that is because, again, anxious DM. So I like to try to prepare for as many things as possible. However, I absolutely love when they don't do any of those things and they go down a completely different path, because to me, that makes me flex my DM skills more. And then I end up coming away from the session feeling like awesome about it. You know, awesome that I could like pivot and turn based on that. And so that battle, they ended up, again, casting, like, what is it called? Hypnotic pattern, I think is what it's called. Incapacitating pretty much like all of my goblins, even my crazy hard hitters. Because they did that, they could take out one goblin at a time, and so they ended up keeping the last goblin and capturing them, which was not something I had figured they would do, you know what I mean? Then I ended up pulling information that they wouldn't have learned until they got to the actual war camp into that interrogation, because he would know those information or that information. And I think, to me, I think that was like good on me. Like I did a good as a DM and was able to actually like do that on the fly and figure it out. It also left it was the end of the session, so it like hinted at this terrible beastie in the water that was terrorizing them, and hinted that the goblin boss was looking for something crazy in the water to appease the mistress. Like, it gave them like a hook to come back to as well, because I wasn't sure that they would make it to the war camp like by that point, and I wasn't 100% sure how to end it other than with the story of the sea leviathan at one point protecting the land around it. I underestimated how much time they would take on that broken bridge map. I did know they would take a long time, because I was like, well, instantly I'm gonna have traps in that first area, so that's gonna make them crawl through the rest of it. But I didn't put together that there were three, there's 3 levels. Technically, there was 3 on each side, even though it was only like a few rooms. It did make that first half crawl. And if I had maybe gotten rid of a floor or blocked off a floor, something like that, I think it would have trimmed it down a bit and made it so that the party arrived at the war camp faster. Of course, hindsight is 2020. I still think that it was good. I do feel that some party members were not as into that dungeon crawly aspect. They're more into that role play and into like the information gleaning, but not necessarily the dungeon crawl aspect. I don't know if other people do this, but I kind of note which players that was. It could have been like an off day too, but I actually have notes on here about that so that I will remember, this person probably doesn't like that dungeon crawly feel. Let's make sure my maps don't necessarily have a lot of that kind of thing, because again, I tailor these a lot to my players. One other thing, I absolutely loved prepping this one because of the lore I built around this lake and this creature, the sea creature. And so I can't give all of it away because I don't remember 100% everything that the players know. And if they watch this, I don't want to give secrets away. But that was so much fun for me. And I feel like I did a pretty good job kind of creating that and fitting it into our world and all of this stuff. One of the things I always struggle with is making these too long. And again, as a West Marches, you want to make sure that you have everything in like one compact session. That doesn't always happen for me, so it's always something I have to struggle with. I haven't really gotten too many complaints on that. I do have like a feedback form, and I read all that feedback after sessions, so that wasn't a major complaint amongst them. So I think it's okay, but again, that the expectation is to have it in one session, and so I need to meet that expectation. This has gotten super long. My recording says it's been like an hour. This is in general what I do for session prep. Typically it takes me anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. It depends on if I have to make a lot of maps or something. I think next time I will try to record it as I am setting up, and then you guys can get the full shebang. So yeah, if you like this kind of content, let me know in the comments down below. I'll do a few more of these until I get enough feedback to say this isn't working or whatever. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!